Welcome back to Tales of Knights and Magic. Subscribe if you like, and now get comfortable and enjoy this glimpse into the world of fantasy. The early morning light bled over the high, craggy ridges encircling the outpost where the call had come. Sir Callan rode slowly, his powerful frame barely contained by the worn leather and battered metal of his once proud armor. With every measured step, he recalled the oath he once took in an age when the Vale was whole and the Ashen Knights stood united beneath a single banner. Now that unity lay shattered. Secrets had splintered the order into warring factions, and the mysterious anomalies that disrupted the delicate balance of Vale ashes threatened to unravel the already fragile peace in the enclosed valley. Rumors of citizens driven mad by inexplicable bursts of raw magic, ruined farmlands scorched by bursts of uncontrollable fire, and entire communities falling prey to strange, shadowed figures fueled his urgency. As he neared the abandoned fortress where the disturbances were first reported, an acrid tang of burnt ash intermingled with the cold mountain air, stirring memories of past battles and lost brothers. Descending into a valley rimmed with jagged cliffs, Callan reined his mount near a crumbling watchtower that had once served as the bastion of the Order's frontier. The stonework, worn and stained by centuries, now bore fresh scorch marks and mysterious glyphs that glowed faintly in the pre-dawn gloom. He dismounted with quiet deliberation, the weight of his regrets and his burden of power heavy upon him. His gaze swept over the wreckage, every cracked fissure in the stone, and every streak of residual magic whispering secrets he was meant to understand, if only he could piece them together. In that somber moment, his thoughts reached out toward old allies, some still devoted to the fractured causes, others now lost or ensnared in their own quests for forbidden power. Before he could uncover more in silence, a figure emerged from behind a collapsed wall. It was Lady Mira, her lithe form almost ethereal in the dim light. Her eyes, quick and probing, betrayed little emotion but suggested that she too had felt the call of destiny in the upheaval of their shared world. "Callan," she began softly, stepping forward and drawing a slender runed blade from its sheath, its hilt flickering with vibrant mana. "I had hoped to find you here sooner. The disturbances, they're not isolated. Our people are whispering about odd mists, unaccounted for surges of elemental power, and a malevolence that creeps in like a living fog. We must act before the chaos spreads." Callan nodded, his deep voice resonating with the scars of previous conflicts. "I know, Mira. The Order is fractured, but these anomalies, whatever their origin, they threaten not only our traditions but the essence of our strength. We must uncover their cause and restore what was lost." Their words echoed against the stone, a promise to each other and to the vanishing remnants of a long-forgotten order that once held the Vale in balance through the ashen binding. The ritual of that binding, which had granted knights like him superhuman strength at the cost of parts of their humanity, was now turning into a curse. Its power, once revered, was now unleashing unpredictable magic. Together they moved deeper into the fortress, where shattered archways and dust-laden corridors told the tale of a time when the Ashen Knights ruled with both light and elemental fury. Callan's footsteps stirred echoes of battles long past, each stone underfoot a silent witness to the fervor of magic once channeled in disciplined harmony. Along the way they encountered traces of desperate struggle, shields splintered by unholy forces, banners torn and stained with the blood of those who fought for unity, and inscriptions hinting at a pact made with the very essence of the Vale itself, a pact now on the brink of being broken. In one vast chamber, the air thrummed with ancient power. The space was dotted with relics of the past, a shattered helm here, a fragmented shield there, each artifact pulsing faintly with an energy that seemed to resonate with Callan's own embattled heart. It was here that he recalled the old teachings of the Stonebinders, that the Vale ashes were not merely remnants of an ancient boundary, but living echoes of a covenant between the mortal and ethereal realms. He closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of introspection, before Mira's gentle voice wove him back to the present. "There is more to this disturbance than errant magic, Callan," she murmured. "I sense a stirring like a whisper in the wind, a memory of something forgotten, pulling at the threads of fate. We are not alone in our struggle." As they progressed, their path led them to an inner sanctum, where the air grew thick with the sulphurous tang of arcane energy. There, within a dome of intricately carved stone, and illuminated by the dance of spectral light, they found Brother Thorn and Celine. Thorn, once a fiery ember knight, whose own inner flames had nearly consumed him, now stood with weary determination etched on his lined face, his eyes reflecting the turmoil of his own conscience. Beside him was Celine, the mysterious shade user with eyes that held the sorrow and hope of bygone eras. The air around them shimmered in anticipation, as if the very elements recognized that a moment of reckoning was at hand. Without preamble, Brother Thorn spoke, his voice carrying the gravitas of a man who had seen too many battles lose their righteousness. We've tracked the disturbances for weeks, following the erratic pulses of raw veil energy that surge from these ruins. They are not random. They are the signatures of a long-suppressed force, an undercurrent of malevolence that your order once kept at bay. But something has changed. The balance is shifting, and the fragile wards that held the darkness back are failing. Celine's voice, soft as a sigh yet steeped in conviction, added, "I have seen visions in the shadows, whispers of a force bound within the depths of these stones. It calls itself the remnant of the veil, a vestige of magic that predates even our most ancient rites. If we do not act, its resurgence could unmake everything we once held sacred." Her gaze locked with Callan's, an unspoken understanding passing between the two warriors. Their fates, along with those of countless others bound to the remnants of the veil, were now inextricably linked. There was urgency in the tone of their collective voices, a call to arms that transcended past grievances and divided loyalties. In that dim sanctuary, they pooled their fragmented knowledge and debated their next course of action. The dialogue was measured yet impassioned, fraught with the weight of history and the knowledge that their decision could tip the balance between order and chaos. Kaelin recalled the hallowed rituals of the Ashen Binding, rituals that had once united knights in a solemn covenant to protect both the mortal realm and the very essence of magic itself. Now those bindings were frayed and corrupted by jealousy, fear, and personal ambition. "We must journey deeper into the heart of these ruins," Kaelin declared, his voice resolute despite the lingering tremor of doubt. "There is a place, one that we only whispered of in our darkest rites, a hidden sanctum where the original pact with the veil was forged. It is there that we may find the answers we seek, and perhaps rekindle the unity that once defined us." Mira nodded in agreement, her eyes gleaming with a fierce determination that belied her youth. "I have seen omens in the wind," she said quietly. "They speak of a convergence, a moment when the essences of our abilities may be reunited or forever sundered. We stand at that precipice, as the assembled company resolved to delve into the labyrinthine depths of the fortress. The corridors that had witnessed centuries of triumphs and tragedies seemed to murmur in anticipation, their walls echoing the footsteps of those who had once striven to harness the magic of the veil. The journey was not merely one of physical distance, but a traversal through the passageways of memory and the latent energies that had long lain dormant. In the lower levels of the fortress, the temperature dropped, and an otherworldly silence descended. The residual glow of glyphs on the walls faded into haunting shadows, and the very air felt charged with potent magic. Here the group encountered evidence of a recent disturbance, a collection of shattered relics and scorched parchment scattered across a long-abandoned council chamber. Kaelin's skilled eyes discerned the hurried script, remnants of a confession scrawled in a hand that trembled with both fear and remorse. It spoke of forbidden experiments with the veil ashes, attempts to harness their power to create a new order, an order that would transcend the old ways by embracing the darkest facets of magic. As Kaelin read these words aloud, the sorrow of countless lost ideals pressed down on him like a physical weight. "This betrayal," he murmured, "was not born of malice alone, but of desperation, an ambition to salvage something beautiful from the ashes of our former glory." Their journey through the inner recesses of the fortress was punctuated by sudden bursts of magical confrontations. In one narrow corridor, a squad of spectral warriors, bound by twisted arcane chains, emerged from the shadows. Their forms were ephemeral yet threatening, each one a tortured echo of a once proud knight turned into a guardian of forbidden lore. The encounter was brutal and unyielding, Kaelin's stone-forged strength clashing against the relentless assault of ethereal blades, Mira's swift strikes complemented by Celine's manipulation of darkness, and Brother Thorn summoning embers of his once raging fury to burn away the apparitions. The relentless ballet of combat reverberated along the ancient stone walls, and amidst the frenzy, the companions fought not just for survival, but for the honor of a legacy tarnished by internal strife. As the last of the spectral guardians dissolved into fading motes of light, a haunting echo of their cries lingered in the corridor, a reminder that every victory in these cursed halls was steeped in sorrow and sacrifice. With their weapons stained by the residue of magic and their bodies aching from the unyielding clash of opposing forces, they advanced further into the labyrinth. Along a passageway where twisted carvings depicted the history of the Ashen Knights, Kalen found himself drawn to a mural that depicted a towering figure, holding aloft a shard of pure radiant ash, a symbol of unyielding resolve and unity. That image, lost to the ravages of time, sparked a flicker of hope in his battle-worn heart. He recalled the words of his old mentor, a man who had once spoken of the veil as a living covenant between past and future, a force that could heal as readily as it destroyed. "In our unity lies our salvation," his mentor had said. That echo of wisdom urged Kalen to press on, to peel back the layers of deceit and rediscover the true essence of their order. Their progress was not without further trials. At one point, the corridor opened into a vast antechamber, its vaulted ceiling lost in gloom. Here, intricate mosaics captured scenes of battles long faded into legend and rites that had sealed the fate of civilizations. It was in this silent, somber space that Mira paused to listen to the murmurs of the stone itself, attuning herself to the lingering memory of ancient spells. "I sense a fissure in the weave," she said softly, her hand tracing a series of runes etched into the floor. "It is as if the very foundation of our magic is unraveling here." The gravity of her observation swept over the group with an almost palpable intensity, each member of the company feeling the tremors of a power that defied simple comprehension. In that cavernous hall, a subtle shift in the atmosphere heralded an unseen presence stirring in the recesses of the fortress. The group could feel it, a slow, deliberate heartbeat of the old magic echoing the struggles and triumphs of a forgotten age. In the dim light of that ancient antechamber, Kalen's mind was a battleground of conflicting emotions, the stubborn hope of rekindling the old bonds of unity pitted against the bitter realization of how deeply divided the order had become. Every step took him closer to the core of the disturbance, yet every step also dredged up memories of comrades fallen to madness, of battles fought against both external enemies and the internal decay that had seeped into their hearts. Even as he fought off the encroaching despair, his resolve hardened like the stone of the fortress under his hands, and his voice when he finally spoke was firm and resolute. "Our past may be fractured, but there is still time to mend what has been broken. We must discover the source of these anomalies and reclaim the sacred covenant that once united us all under the veil's protective embrace." Brother Thorn, whose weathered features bore witness to years of internal torment and regret, responded with a tone of resigned determination. "The ashes within us burn, but they can also scorch us if we do not respect the balance. Whatever force has been unleashed here, we must confront it with both our strength and our wisdom." The fellowship pressed onward, navigating twisting corridors and forgotten halls that resonated with the energy of a time when magic was both feared and revered. In one secluded passage, hidden beneath layers of dust and ancient runes, they found a sealed chamber. Its door, wrought from iron and etched with protective symbols, trembled with a power that set their hearts racing. Despite their wary caution, they pried it open, and the surge of raw, untamed mana swept over them like a tidal wave. Within lay an altar, scarred by time yet radiating an almost palpable sorrow, a monument to the sacrifices and the promises of the Ashen Knights. Kalen reached out and touched the altar, his fingers igniting with a subtle glow as if awakened by his touch. The sensations that coursed through him were both wondrous and terrible, a maelstrom of memory and power that threatened to overwhelm his senses. In that moment, he understood that the disturbances were not merely attacks on isolated bastions of magic. They were symptoms of a deeper, more profound disintegration of the covenant that had long governed their world. The air around them pulsed with the steady thrum of ancient incantations, and beneath that pulse lay a silence that held the weight of countless lost vows. As the group absorbed the chilling revelation etched into the very stones of the chamber, a sense of urgency surged forth. There was no turning back. Every step they took now carried the heavy responsibility of rewriting a legacy that had once been defined by unyielding unity. The ancient architecture, the faint glow of residual runes, and the lingering echoes of battle all converged into a singular poignant reminder. The Ashen Knights, in their fragmentation, had lost more than just a once great power. They had lost the very soul of their covenant with the Veil. In that crucible of memory and magic, amid the interplay of light and shadow, Kalen and his companions steeled themselves against the encroaching darkness. Their hearts beat as one with the timeless cadence of a force that spans centuries, and as they exited the sealed chamber, the corridors before them seemed to open as a gateway into the uncharted depths of both the fortress and their own intertwined destinies. The path ahead promised trials of strength, tests of loyalty, and revelations that would force each of them to confront the darkest corners of their past and the uncertain future of their order. The ruins of the fortress bore witness to both the triumphs and the tragedies of those who had dared to bind themselves to the magic of the Veil. And now, in the wavering light of a broken dawn, those same ruins summoned Kalen and his companions onward. Their journey continued without respite, each step forging a deeper connection between the fractured remnants of a once proud lineage. The relentless beat of the ancient hearts of stone guided them further into realms where the boundaries between duty, honor, and sacrifice blurred into a singular call for rebirth. In the echo of every stone and in the whisper of every rune, the legacy of the Ashen Knights spoke of a time when even the deepest scars could heal under the right confluence of valor and unity. And so, with hearts both heavy and hopeful, Kalen, Mira, Thorn, and Celine pressed on, bearing the weight of a promise that, if reclaimed, might yet restore the delicate balance between magic and mortality that governed their beleaguered world. The ancient corridors of the fortress seemed to whisper secrets in a language long silenced, and Lady Mira moved through them as if guided by an unseen force. The previous battles and the haunting echoes of the past still reverberated through these halls, and now the weight of forgotten lore beckoned her deeper into the heart of mystery. With the company already burdened by the discoveries made earlier by Sir Kalen, Brother Thorn, and Celine, Mira found herself inexplicably drawn to a secluded archive hidden behind a wall of worn stone. The subtle pulsations of magical energy that emanated from its depths called to her innate affinity for the Gale arts, a resonance that hinted at knowledge far beyond the physical realm. Pushing aside a heavy slab of ancient masonry, she revealed a concealed chamber. Dust and memories mingled in the stale air, and the dim glow of her mana-bound talisman danced across walls covered in crumbling script and faded illustrations. The texts were written in a script that predated even the earliest accounts of the Ashen Knights, a language of symbols and metaphors that resonated with the raw, unrefined power of the Veil. Mira unrolled a brittle scroll, its edges curling like the wings of a long-forgotten creature. As she deciphered the archaic calligraphy, she discovered accounts of a covenant forged when the boundary between the ethereal and mortal realms was still fresh, a time when magic flowed unbounded and free. The Ashen Binding, as it turned out, was not solely a means to grant knights superhuman strength and elemental prowess. It was a rite of passage designed to connect souls to the very essence of creation, a sacred ritual meant to embody the balance between light and darkness. The text recounted that the binding was originally intended to be a temporary merging, a transient state where the recipient would willingly channel the Veil's energy to protect and enlighten. Instead, the ritual had evolved, or perhaps devolved, into a permanent state, a slow, inexorable surrender of one's humanity to the allure of unrestrained magic. The realization struck Mira like a gust of icy wind. The Ashen Binding was an abomination created by desperation, a relic of an age when hope and fear intertwined to create a desperate attempt at salvation. Her heart pounded as she absorbed the revelation that the binding's very design was to serve as a bridge between realms, not as a chain to ensnare mortal souls. Her mind raced with questions. Who were the original binders, and why had the ritual twisted over time? Could the order have been manipulated by external forces, perhaps even by the remnants of the Veil itself? With trembling fingers, Mira gathered as many scrolls and tablets as she could, each one chronicling a facet of the Ashen Binding's ancient purpose. She took careful note of recurring symbols, a spiral motif representing cyclical rebirth, an interlocking pair of runes hinting at balance, and a singular mark that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat in the darkness. In these faded manuscripts, There were also accounts of dissent among the earliest practitioners, voices that warned of the inherent danger in harnessing magic meant to remain ephemeral. These warnings had been lost to the passage of time, buried beneath layers of dogma and the pragmatic need for power in a turbulent world. Meanwhile, as Mira pored over the texts, the fortress itself seemed to stir with growing awareness. Unbeknownst to her, subtle disturbances manifested in the corners of her vision. A series of soft thuds echoed in the distance, accompanied by the creaking of ancient floorboards. It was not long before Kaelin, Thorn, and Celine arrived to find her surrounded by the relics of a past that was slowly coming to life. Kaelin's stern gaze softened for a moment as he took in the scene, the gentle illumination of old knowledge, the delicate interplay of shadows and light caressing the forgotten archive. Mira, he greeted, his voice resonating with a mix of curiosity and relief. What have you discovered in these forsaken halls? Mira looked up, her eyes aflame with the urgency of revelation. There is so much more, she said quietly, her voice echoing off the cold stone walls. These texts speak of a time when the ashen binding was an honor, a sacrament to connect the wielder to the pure essence of the veil. But somewhere along the line that purpose was subverted. Our order chose permanence over the transient brilliance of true magic, and in doing so we lost the ability to ever fully harness its beauty. Brother Thorn, his face etched with the scars of many battles both external and internal, stepped forward. Then it was never meant to last, he murmured, his tone heavy with regret and lingering fury. I remember fragments of that promise from before I was bound as an ember knight. The power was meant to illuminate, not blind us to our own humanity. His hands trembled as he recalled the nights of uncontrollable flames, the searing heat that consumed not only his foes but threatened to burn him from within. If the binding was meant as a bridge, what caused it to harden into these shackles? He demanded, his voice barely rising above a whisper, laden with the ache of a lifetime ensnared by contradictory forces. Celine's eyes, ever watchful and guarded, gleamed with an inner light as she regarded the ancient scripts. Perhaps, she began slowly, the answer lies not in how the binding was formed, but in how it was corrupted over the ages. Magic in its purest form is meant to ebb and flow like the tide. But if you dam the tide, even the gentlest current can become a raging torrent. What if our predecessors succumbed to the temptation of control, seeking to bind that uncontrollable force permanently to their will? Her words hung in the air, a delicate balance between hope and despair, an acknowledgement that even the highest ideals could be twisted by human ambition. The group gathered around a large stone table, its surface scarred by centuries of use, and began to unravel the enigma of the ancient covenant. Mira meticulously laid out the texts she had salvaged, her fingers tracing the faded ink as if absorbing the wisdom of ages past. The manuscripts spoke of celestial cycles and the unending dance between creation and destruction. They recounted the prophecy of a time when the boundaries between the mortal world and the veil would blur, allowing for the convergence of untamed magic and human spirit, a moment when the true balance would be restored or irrevocably shattered. As hours turned to days, the quartet labored over the deciphering of every symbol and verse, pooling their combined experiences with magic and combat to piece together the puzzle. Mira's innate talent for deciphering arcane languages, honed by her years as a Gale Knight, proved invaluable. With each newly uncovered fragment, she began to see patterns emerge, a cosmic blueprint that outlined the original vision of the Ashen Binding, as well as the subtle deviations that had led to its current corruption. The text revealed that the original ritual involved a ritualistic communion, a day of release and renewal, where the participants would temporarily relinquish their mortal forms to merge with the essence of the veil. It was a sublime, almost spiritual act, a true merger of spirit and magic that allowed them to glimpse the infinitude of existence. But then came the schism, a divergence in philosophy spurred by fear and the harsh realities of mortal existence. The text recounted how, following an era of rampant external threats and internal strife, the leaders of the order decided to modify the ritual permanently. Their intentions were noble, or at least so it was claimed, to ensure that the magic remained a constant safeguard against the encroaching darkness. In their haste, They imposed permanence on what was meant to be fleeting, a decision that shackled them to the very magic they had once revered as the source of life itself. The more Mira read, the more her heart grew heavy with the implications. "We have inherited a curse, not a blessing," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the soft rustle of ancient paper. "Every night, every soul within our order carries this burden of a broken promise." Her words were met with solemn nods, and even Kaelin, whose hardened exterior often betrayed little emotion, seemed momentarily softened by the shared grief of these revelations. "This," Kaelin said, his deep tone resonating in the quiet of the archive, "is the root of our disarray. We were meant to be the living embodiment of a covenant between worlds, but instead, we've become prisoners of our own power, enslaved by magic that was meant to free us." Thorn's gaze darkened as he recalled memories of his own struggles. "I have seen firsthand the destructive potential when such power becomes absolute," he said with a measured tone. "I was once engulfed in flames that I thought would purify my soul, but instead they left me scarred, a constant reminder of what happens when magic supplants humanity." His words resonated with a deep-seated anger, a personal vendetta against the very system that had undone so many lives. Yet within his anger lay the seeds of possibility, a determination to understand the true nature of the binding, and perhaps, just perhaps, find a way to reclaim the grace that had been lost. Celine, standing at the edge of their makeshift study, regarded the pile of texts with quiet determination. "There must be a way to restore balance, to reawaken the true purpose of the Ashen Binding," she declared softly. "If we can decode the original formula, a communion rather than a conquest, we might be able to reverse this entrenched corruption, but it will not be without risk." Her words seemed to hang in the charged silence, a proposal laced with both hope and the threat of untold dangers. As the weight of the revelation sunk in, the fortress around them seemed to pulse with an ancient, almost sentient energy. Every step in the secluded archive, every rustle of decaying parchment, was imbued with the history of countless souls who had sacrificed a piece of their essence in pursuit of an everlasting bond with magic. Mira could almost feel the ghosts of those who had come before, knights whose laughter, sorrow, and unyielding courage were etched into the very fabric of the stones surrounding them. Amidst the quiet solitude of the ruined archive, the past reached out to them like an echo across a vast chasm, urging them to remember the promise of renewal that had once been the true vision of the binding. Day after day, Mira worked tirelessly, her eyes straining to piece together the fragments of an ancient language that seemed, at times, to shift and morph before her eyes, as though the texts themselves were reluctant to reveal their secrets. In moments of quiet introspection, she imagined the original ritual, a time of communal celebration, where the knights, their hearts unburdened by the fear of permanence, would gather under the open sky to relinquish the fleeting nature of mortal limitations. They would become one with the swirling mists of the veil, basking in the ephemeral brilliance of magic unmarred by the constraints of mortality. The power of that moment, of that unity, was something ineffable, a light that had the potential to illuminate even the darkest corners of their fractured order. Yet the texts also spoke of betrayal and ambition. Some among the original binders had coveted the immortal grasp on power, twisting the sacred ritual into a tool of control and domination. With every turn of the fragile pages, Mira's heart ached for the innocence that had been sacrificed at the altar of fear. In the margins of a particularly tattered scroll, she found a delicate illustration that captured a solemn ceremony. Knights surrounded by elemental fire and cascading water, their faces illuminated with transcendental light, their eyes alight with the pure ecstasy of merging with the divine. Below the image was inscribed a warning, a dire admonition that those who sought to anchor the ephemeral would only bind themselves to the relentless march of oblivion. The more Mira uncovered, the clearer it became that the corruption of the binding was not an isolated incident, nor was it solely the fault of those who misused magic. It was a systemic flaw, a tragic twist in the evolution of a sacred art that had once promised salvation. An undercurrent of collective failure permeated the very pages of the ancient text, and as she read, Mira felt the silent cries of those lost to the binding, their hopes drowned in the relentless surge of power that had instead become a curse. In a moment of quiet resolve, she gathered her findings and prepared to share them with her companions. She knew that the revelations in these texts held the key to understanding not only the origins of the Ashen Binding, but also a potential path forward, a way to restore the delicate balance between the veil and the mortal realm. Returning to the main chamber where Kaelin Thorne and Selene awaited, Mira's voice grew steady as she recounted the visions and insights drawn from the ancient manuscripts. "We stand at a crossroads," she said, her words imbued with both urgency and a tempered hope. The binding was conceived as a fleeting communion, a moment of unity with the veil's true power, but over time that communion was solidified into permanence, and in doing so we lost the very essence of what made magic beautiful and free. Now we must ask ourselves, can we reclaim that transient brilliance, or are we doomed to live as perpetual shadows of what we once dreamed to be? Kaelin's furrowed brow deepened with every word, the silent conflicts of leadership and duty warring with his inherent desire to restore honor to their order. "The burden of power has always come with sacrifice," he muttered, his deep voice echoing in the hallowed chamber. "Yet if our heritage is built upon a lie, a promise that was meant to be ephemeral, perhaps the only path forward is to break these bindings and return to the original covenant." His gaze shifted from Mira's determined face to the ancient texts scattered around them, and for a long moment the shared conviction of their collective past seemed to radiate from the very stone beneath their feet. Brother Thorne's voice, raw with the passion of one who had known both the searing flames of ambition and the bitter sting of regret, joined the solemn dialogue. "Every moment bound by this corrupted power is a moment lost in the labyrinth of our own making," he declared. "I have seen the toll it takes on a soul, turning once proud knights into husks driven by an insatiable hunger for more power. We must find a way to decouple the divine and the destructive, to restore magic as a force of liberation rather than subjugation." His words, heavy with the weight of personal experience, resonated deeply within the hearts of all who listened. Selene, ever the sentinel of lost truths, interjected with a quiet but undeniable firmness. "There is danger in this path, in unearthing secrets that time itself may have vowed to let lie buried, but if we do not attempt to revive the original essence of the binding, we risk sealing our fate as mere vessels of a force that we no longer control." Her eyes, reflecting a resolve as deep as the mysteries she sought to unravel, met each of theirs in turn, conveying a pact forged not in ink or stone, but in the shared determination to reclaim a legacy that had been eroded by centuries of misguided ambition. In the days that followed, the fortress's hidden archive became both their sanctuary and their crucible. As Mira and her companions labored over the ancient manuscripts, the very air around them seemed charged with expectancy. The soft rustling of pages became a hymn to lost eras, and every deciphered line wove a new thread into the tapestry of their rekindled purpose. Within the dim glow of a solitary lantern, Mira began to draft a meticulous account, a blueprint for a ritual that might restore the original communion with the veil. The plan was audacious: to replicate the transient nature of the ancient binding, to merge their mortal essence with the ephemeral glow of magic in a controlled sacrificial act meant solely for renewal. Each of them would have to volunteer, to relinquish part of themselves, in order to realign the delicate balance between mortal frailty and the infinite vitality of the veil. As the hours crept into the deep twilight of another day, Mira's mind grew both heavier and more resolute. The text provided cryptic indications of a convergence point, a hidden sanctum within the fortress where the boundaries between the two realms were thinnest. It was here that the original binders had once convened to perform their communion, their voices rising in unison as the veil's raw power flowed through them, forging a connection that was as brief as it was brilliant. With this knowledge, the company set about planning a journey to this sanctum, a quest that promised to challenge not only their physical fortitude, but the very nature of their beliefs. In this endless pursuit, the bonds among the four grew stronger, tempered by shared discovery and the realization that their fate was entwined with that of an ancient promise. Mira's face, illuminated by the pale glow of the lantern and the soft shimmer of ancient magic, was a portrait of determination and quiet desperation. As she meticulously annotated her research and prepared for the journey into the unknown depths of the fortress, the others watched her with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. They understood that the ritual she envisioned was fraught with peril. It demanded not only the union of their abilities, but a surrender of the self to a power that transcended mortal comprehension. Yet in that surrender lay the hope of redemption for their fractured order, a possibility to restore what had been lost through the years of corrupted ambition and sorrowful compromise. The air in the archive grew thick with anticipation as Mira closed the final manuscript and looked up at her companions. "We have found the key to our past," she said in a voice that trembled between hope and fear. "But the key is not without its price. If we follow this path, we may ignite a spark that rekindles the ancient communion, or we may unleash a force too potent for us to contain." Her gaze drifted to each face in the flickering light, the steely resolve of Kaelin, the sorrow and determination of Thorn, and the unyielding optimism in Celine's eyes. In that moment, the weight of destiny pressed upon them all, a shared burden that transcended the individual and bound them together in a quest for truth and renewal. As dusk fell once more over the fortress, Mira and her companions emerged from the hidden archive, carrying with them not only the fragile manuscripts, but the spark of a rebellion against the corrupted legacy of the Ashen Binding. Their footsteps resounded along stone corridors steeped in history, every step a reminder of the promise of the ancient covenant, a promise now obscured by layers of ambition and despair. They set out toward the convergence point, navigating twisting passages and forgotten chambers where the echoes of age-old ceremonies mingled with the present. With each stride, the revelation of the past grew ever more tangible, a beacon of lost ideals that beckoned them toward a future where magic might once again be pure and free. Even as dark clouds gathered over the fortress, and the chill of impending night seeped into their bones, the company moved with a shared fervor, driven by the conviction that understanding the past was the only path to reclaiming their future. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty and danger, yet the promise of restoration shone like a distant star, an echo of a time when unity and the transient brilliance of magic melded to create something truly magnificent. And so they pressed onward, the secrets of the ancient covenant whispering to them from every shadowed corner of the labyrinthine fortress, urging them to rediscover a long-forgotten truth that might still save their fractured order from the consuming darkness. Brother Thorn and Celine left the relative shelter of the ancient archive with heavy hearts and determined minds, stepping away from the hallowed chamber of forgotten lore into corridors where the present and past merged in a shifting tapestry of spectral light and encroaching shadows. The air was colder now, the silence punctuated by the distant echoes of lost vows and the low hum of forbidden energy that pulsed through the stone walls. As they descended winding staircases carved into the bedrock beneath the fortress, the ground vibrated with the residual power of old magic and unspoken regrets. Thorn's face, marked by scars both visible and hidden, was a map of battles past, a litany of successes and failures that now converged in this singular ominous moment. Celine's eyes, dark pools of reflection and resolve, scanned their surroundings with a vigilance that belied her calm exterior. For in each fragment of darkness she sensed not only physical danger but the intangible whispers of her own tormented past. They moved as one through narrow passageways where the dim glow of residual mana revealed fleeting images, half-glimpsed faces that drifted in and out of the periphery, like memories not fully formed and feelings too potent to simply ignore. The oppressive atmosphere was nearly tangible, pressing against them with the weight of endless sorrow and regret. Thorn's thoughts wandered back to the days when he had first been bound by the Ashen Binding, when the flames of his own inner fire had surged with youthful intensity before gradually consuming his humanity. Each step carried with it the burden of choices made in desperation, battles fought against unseen demons, and the constant dread that he was both the protector and the prison of a power that could not be fully contained. The corridors twisted and turned, their walls inscribed with archaic runes and lamentations of ancient souls. In these cryptic lines, Thorn recognized echoes of his own inner turmoil, a script of betrayal, hope, and a desperate longing for redemption that had haunted him through every conflict. Celine spoke softly as they walked, her voice merging with the hum of the ley lines beneath their feet. "I feel it here, in the echoes of these stones. It is as if the veil itself bleeds sorrow and regret, and the disturbance we seek is not merely external, it is woven into the fabric of our very existence." Her words, though quiet, carried the weight of someone who had seen both beauty and horror in the world of shadows, a world where light was scarce and every glimmer of hope was jeopardized by the threat of obliteration. Thorn, whose voice was rarely soft, allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability as he replied, "I have carried this burden for so long, this burning regret, this unquenchable anger at the choices that led me here. I fear that the corruption within the veil is but a reflection of the corruption within ourselves." His tone was laced with bitter introspection, a confession to the darkness that surrounded them and to the specters that occasionally emerged from the corners of his mind. Their path soon led them to a vast subterranean gallery, a cavernous expanse where time seemed suspended and the very essence of the veil pulsed in vibrant iridescent patterns along the walls. The space was alive with the energy of forgotten rituals and unspoken promises, the air thrumming with the cadence of ancient incantations that had long since faded from mortal memory. In the center of the gallery stood an enormous pool of water, its surface like polished obsidian reflecting not only the flickering light from above, but also scenes of moments past, fleeting visions of nights in battle, of joyous reunions, of lamentations in the quiet hours of the night. It was in this pool that Thorn caught a glimpse of his younger self, a time when his eyes had burned with unbridled passion and his heart had known no disillusionment. The image was both painful and invigorating, igniting a conflict that raged within him. For a moment, the specter of his former idealism, pure and untainted by the relentless pressures of power, whispered a promise of redemption that seemed almost within reach. Yet as quickly as the memory surfaced, it dissolved into the surrounding darkness, leaving behind a void filled with bitter regret. Celine approached the edge of the pool, her delicate fingers grazing its surface in a silent gesture of communion with the past. "We are drawn here because the disturbances originate from this place," she murmured. "The pool is a nexus, a convergence of the old and the new, where the original covenant of the ashen binding touched the mortal world and left its indelible mark." Her eyes, reflecting the shifting images within the dark water, searched Thorn's face for any sign of understanding or hope. He only stared, lost in the swirling vortex of memories and the overwhelming clarity of the moment. The silence between them was broken by a sudden violent tremor in the very ground beneath their feet, a reminder that the stagnant remnants of old magic were stirring with a force that could no longer be ignored. The water roiled as if awakening from a long slumber, and from its depths emerged shapes that were at once both beautiful and terrifying, figures draped in ethereal light and cloven shadows, spectral warriors whose eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity. Their forms were insubstantial yet potent, wielding weapons that shimmered with raw mana and bearing expressions of sorrow and resolve. Without warning, the spectral phalanx surged forward, their ethereal blades slashing through the charged air. Thorn reacted instinctively, summoning the deep burning embers of his inner fire. Flames erupted from his hands, casting fierce, dancing shadows across the walls as he met the spectral attackers head-on. The clash was both savage and elegant, a ballet of flickering fire and shifting darkness that illuminated the cavern in a surreal display of spectral combat. Celine moved alongside him, her movements as fluid and sinuous as the shadows she commanded. She reached out to the beings with hands that seemed to ripple with dark energy, her power tempering the raw violence of the onslaught and bending it to her will. The battle was a tempest of elemental fury, where Thorn's blazing strikes met the cool, deceptive grace of Celine's manipulation of darkness, and each fallen specter seemed to leave behind a lingering echo of regret and lost hope. In the midst of the fray, Thorn found himself not only battling the external manifestations of corrupted magic but also the internal specters that had haunted him for years. Every clash of fire against shadow, every roar of defiance in the cavern, rekindled memories of battles fought against both literal and metaphorical demons. The cacophony of combat became a mirror reflecting his own inner torment, a relentless reminder of the choices that had led him down this arduous path. His mind flashed back to the time when he had first embraced the burning power of the veil, when the flames within him had promised strength and valor but ultimately consumed the parts of him that had once been human. Now, as each spectral foe fell to his wrath, the victory was bittersweet, a triumph laced with the sorrow of what he had sacrificed in his relentless pursuit of power and duty. Celine's voice rose above the clamor of battle, a haunting melody that intertwined with the clash of weapon and will. "We must push forward," she called, her words laced with both determination and urgency. The core of the corruption lies deeper within these catacombs. Each fallen guardian is but a fragment of the larger rift that tears at the veil between what was and what could be. Her incantations wove intricate patterns in the air, binding the lingering shadows and ordering them into shapes that revealed hidden passages and secret runes. As she advanced, her every step unleashed ripples of dark energy that coalesced into transient sigils, offering brief glimpses of the ancient ritual that had once bound the Ashen Knights in unity. Thorn, fighting fiercely alongside her, could feel the pull of those forgotten rites, an almost magnetic draw to the very heart of the disturbances that now threatened to engulf them both. As the battle raged and the echoes of clashing elements reverberated off the cavern walls, a fissure in the stone floor began to widen, a yawning chasm that seemed to breathe out the remnants of lost eras. From its depths, a low, mournful sound resonated, as if the earth itself were lamenting the centuries of sorrow and destruction it had witnessed. The spectral warriors, momentarily halted by the sudden rupture, gathered themselves around the edge of the chasm, their luminous eyes fixed upon a darkness that pulsed with an almost sentient malice. Thorn's heart pounded in tandem with the tremors that shook the cavern. He recognized in that abyss the manifestation of the corruption they had long sought to understand, a wound in the very fabric of the veil, left open and festering by years of neglect and misuse. Without hesitation, Celine advanced towards the chasm, her expression one of resolute determination. "This is it," she whispered, barely audible over the din of fading combat and the groan of shifting stones. The origin of the corruption, the moment when the old covenant was broken and power was taken from its intended flow. Thorn hesitated for only a moment before following, driven by a mixture of dread and a desperate yearning for absolution. Their footsteps echoed as they carefully descended into the fissure, the passage narrowing until they were enveloped in a twilight of flickering mana and uncertain memories. The air here was thick and oppressive, every breath laced with the tang of ancient regret and bitter remorse. The remnants of a once sacred ritual lingered like ghosts in the darkness, and the further they ventured, the more Thorn felt the weight of his own history bearing down upon him. In the gloom, the cavern walls became stained with the blood of old battles and the residue of arcane energies that had long since dissipated into sorrowful echoes. Thorn's mind wandered unbidden to moments of triumphant glory now marred by the brutal consequences of unbridled ambition. His fingers brushed against ancient carvings that spoke of unity and sacrifice, a language of symbols that once promised transcendence but had since warped into a record of despair. The passage narrowed further until the darkness seemed to consume every ounce of light and hope, leaving behind only the raw, unfiltered truth of what had been lost. As they pressed deeper, the oppressive aura of the corruption began to manifest in tangible forms, whispers in an unintelligible tongue, cold currents that lapped at their skin, and fleeting visions of figures, twisted by anguish, reaching out in silent entreaty. Celine's power swirled around her like a mantle of living shadow, protecting them from the worst of the spectral onslaught that rose from the abyss, even as she pushed forward with unwavering resolve. Every step into that Stygian realm was a confrontation with the duality of their existence, a reminder that within every heart lay both the capacity for redemption and the seeds of irrevocable decay. Thorn's memories, dark and unrelenting, surged forth as if awakened by the raw energy of the corrupted veil. Faces of fallen comrades, of friends lost to their own inner demons, and of adversaries who had once been noble in purpose haunted him in vivid detail. With every heartbeat, he was reminded of the price he had paid, a price measured in the erosion of trust, the shattering of ideals, and the irrevocable separation from the light he once knew. Yet even as despair threatened to overtake him, the presence of Celine offered a counterbalance, a quiet strength that resounded with the possibilities of renewal and the chance to mend what had been so long fractured. In that suffocating darkness, as they reached the heart of the chasm, the overwhelming presence of corruption coalesced into a singular pulsating vortex of raw magic. It was a swirling maelstrom of disparate energies, an uncontrolled convergence of the ancient covenant's remnants and the chaotic distortions wrought by countless years of misuse. The vortex radiated a force that shook the very foundations of the subterranean sanctuary, and its pulsing light revealed transient images, flashes of the original communion between night and veil, and bitter counterpoints to the current decay. Thorn and Selene stood transfixed before this embodiment of lost balance, realizing that here lay the fulcrum upon which the fate of their order and the very future of magic might hinge. As the vortex pulsed with an almost sentient rhythm, the tortured voices of the past began to coalesce into a singular lament, a chorus of regret and unfulfilled promise that resonated deep within both Thorn and Selene. The sound was both horrifying and strangely beautiful, a dirge that spoke of infinite possibilities and inescapable doom. Thorn clenched his fists, feeling once again the searing heat of his inner fire and the painful burden of his own culpability. In that moment, he understood that the corruption was not simply an external adversary to be vanquished, but an intrinsic flaw born of broken ideals and desperate choices, a flaw that had seeped into the very marrow of his being. Selene's eyes, wide with a mixture of sorrow and steely resolve, met his gaze as she extended a hand toward the churning vortex. Without a word, they both recognized that the answers they sought were entangled within this epicenter of shattered promises and lingering hope. Their shared silence spoke volumes, a pledge to confront the past with unwavering determination, even if it meant facing the darkest aspects of their own souls. As they prepared to engage with the living corruption, energy crackled through the air with an intensity that defied description. The walls of the chasm vibrated in response, as if echoing the very heartbeat of an ancient power long suppressed and now awakened. Thorn felt the weight of countless memories press upon him, both the triumphs and the tragedies of an age when the ashen binding was pure and untainted by ambition. The shadows around them convulsed and shifted, forming half-glimpsed shapes that whispered of betrayal, sacrifice, and the possibility of atonement. With every breath, the overwhelming force of the vortex pulled at them, a magnetic call to surrender to its chaotic allure or to fight against it with every last ounce of willpower. In that charged moment, as the corruption's power peaked and the chamber trembled with the echoes of forgotten eras, Thorn and Selene exchanged a look that was a silent covenant unto itself. There was no promise of victory, only the unspoken determination to confront the chaos head-on, to pry loose the secrets buried within that swirling mass of raw, unbridled magic. They advanced, their movements synchronized by the shared cadence of resolve and the unyielding desire to reclaim the purity of the covenant that had once united the Ashen Knights. The air around them roiled with the fury of unleashed potential, a chaotic tapestry where every thread told a story of loss, love, and the desperate hope for redemption. Even now, as the vortex loomed before them, its pulsations marking the boundary between what had been and what might yet be, the journey of Brother Thorn and Selene was far from over. Their path wound deeper into the heart of corruption and memory, and with every step they took, they risked losing themselves to the alluring darkness that beckoned with promises of forbidden knowledge and raw, transformative power. Yet in that uncertainty lay the fragile seeds of change, a chance to confront the shadows of the past, to mend shattered loyalties, and to forge a future that might finally reconcile the ephemeral beauty of magic with the enduring strength of the human spirit. Engulfed in the oppressive darkness of the chasm with the vortex of corruption pulsating before them, Thorn and Selene pressed onward into the unknown depths, their figures merging with the interplay of light and shadow, their fates entwined with the ancient magic that beckoned them further into that labyrinth of memory, regret, and the faint, resilient promise of redemption. The corridors of the ruined fortress, once seething with raw magic and unbridled defiance, now pulsed with a strangely subdued energy. Sir Kaelin, Lady Mira, Brother Thorn, Selene, and the remnants of their fractured order gathered in the great antechamber, a vast hall where once amid fervent chants and resolute oaths, the ashen binding had united them as one. Now, however, the very foundation of their power was shifting. The walls, inscribed with ancient glyphs of unity and sacrifice, glowed dimly as if recoiling from a presence that had not been there before. It was as if the veil, long torn asunder by centuries of abuse and desperate alterations, was beginning to knit itself back together. As the group set foot into the heart of these hallowed ruins, a quiet dread settled over them. The air itself seemed to thicken, weighed down by the gathering might of nature reclaiming what had once been its own. Mira was the first to sense it, a subtle diminishing of the ever-present hum that had until now sustained the knight's extraordinary abilities. Her eyes widened with alarm as she noted that the once vibrant hues of mana dancing in the air had faded into pallid glimmers. "It is as if the very essence of magic is being drawn away," she murmured, her voice trembling with both wonder and apprehension. The others listened as if in a trance, each silently grappling with the realization that the Veil's reconstitution came at a dire cost, the gradual erosion of the power that had been their strength for so long. Kaelin's gauntleted hand pressed against one of the ancient runes carved into the stone, its once luminous carvings now barely discernible beneath layers of dust and sorrowful neglect. He recalled the legends whispered in the long nights of old, that the Veil was never meant to be permanently severed from mortal touch, that its magic was as fleeting as a sigh. In that moment, he understood that the very forces they had so long manipulated were now rebelling against their misuse. The steady receding of elemental brilliance was no accident. It was the natural order reasserting itself. Somewhere deep beneath the once fiery passion of the Ashen Binding, an inexorable force was gathering strength, a force that threatened to strip away not only the Knight's elemental powers, but the very foundation of the magic that their order had come to embody. Thorn, his expression darkened by the weight of his own burdens, stepped forward, his voice a low rumble. "I sense it deep within my bones, a creeping absence where the fire should be. We have become reliant on a corruption of what was once pure magic. Now, as the ashes are reclaimed by the Veil, we find ourselves stripped of our very essence." His confession resonated with the others, each understanding that the cost of their augmented might now demanded a terrible reckoning. They realized that the ancient ritual had become a double-edged sword, granting them extraordinary strength and vitality, yet tethering them to a decaying legacy that was beginning to wither under its own weight. In the days that followed, the group embarked on a journey through the lower depths of the fortress, a labyrinth of tunnels and hidden chambers, where the dwindling remnants of mana pooled like stagnant water. The passageways were choked by creeping ivy and shimmering mists, the very stones exuding a quiet resignation. As they advanced, signs of the mending Veil became ever more apparent, fissures in the floors that pulsed with a gentle, almost imperceptible light. Murals that had once depicted heroic battles and glorious rites now showed images of surrender, with figures dissolving into ephemeral strands of silver mist. It was as if the past was being rewritten in real time, and with it their once unshakable power was slowly evaporating from their fingertips. Their expedition into these depths was fraught with peril. In one vast subterranean gallery, the group encountered a host of unforeseen adversaries, not spectral guardians conjured by corrupted magic, but rather manifestations of nature's resolve to reclaim its lost dominion. Towering figures formed from twisted roots and rugged stone lumbered forth, their eyes aglow with primordial intensity. These arboreal titans roared in a language older than time, their voices echoing off the cavern walls like the rumble of ancient earth. Kaelin met these creatures with a defiant roar, his sword raised high despite the fading strength in his arms. Every swing of his blade, every thrust into the encroaching mass of living stone and bark, was marked by an almost desperate fervor. The battle was fierce and unyielding. The knights, still steeped in the residual magic that was now ebbing away, fought valiantly but with a growing sense of inevitability. Each clashing of metal against natural armor was a poignant reminder of the fragile barrier between what was man-made and what was inherently wild. Mira, her swift movements now tinged with a desperate grace, danced between the onslaught, her wind-infused strikes scattering shards of the enemy's form with each precision cut. Yet even as she fought with all the brilliance of a Gale Knight, she could feel her connection to the currents of magic falter. Every maneuver, every burst of speed was met by the unsettling silence of a power draining away, like a river slowly losing its water to the thirsty earth. In that dread silence, the realization struck her as a bitter truth. If the Veil were to complete its healing, their mystical gifts would dissipate, leaving them as hollow echoes of their former selves. And with them, the very hope of defending the balance between the realms would fade into oblivion. As the battle raged, Celine's quiet magic pulsed in harmonious counterpoint to the rising chaos. Her mastery over the shadows allowed her to weave through the fray, her every gesture a blend of elegance and defiance. She moved to shield her companions whenever the encroaching mists and the reborn magic of nature threatened to overwhelm them. In a moment of brief respite amid the clashing chaos, she knelt by one of the pulsing fissures, a wound in the castle's ancient bone, and traced its rippling edges with a long, slender finger. The fissure responded like a living wound, emitting a soft, crystalline sound that reverberated deep within the cavern, as if it carried the sorrow of ages. "The veil seeks to restore what it has lost," she whispered, her eyes reflecting both grief and determination. "Its healing is absolute, even if it means tearing away the very fabric of power we once believed to be ours." Their struggles were not confined solely to the physical. The mending of the veil also unleashed a battle within their souls. Many among the group felt a disconnect, a void in their being where the endless flow of mana had once suffused every thought, every dream, every aspiration. Kalen, the steadfast pillar of their beleaguered order, watched in grim silence as the vibrant hues of his magic turned to a dull, unresponsive gray. Memories of past glories, of battles waged in the fervor of elemental might, now mingled with the cold dread of inevitable loss. "We built our lives on the illusion of permanence," he murmured to no one in particular, the sound of his own voice echoing off the ancient stone. "The very power we harnessed is not ours to command. It is a wild, unruly force that now seeks to reclaim its rightful place." His words, tinged with the melancholy of decades of hardship, resonated in the hearts of his comrades, binding them in a shared grief for what they might lose. In one particularly harrowing confrontation within a vast domed atrium deep in the fortress's underbelly, the group faced an adversary unlike any they had encountered before. A massive ephemeral entity, a living fragment of the veil itself, had gathered at the center of the chamber, its form swirling with luminous brilliance and oppressive darkness. This guardian of the reformed magic was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Its very presence seemed to sap the vitality from the room, drawing every particle of active mana into its orbit. As it rose slowly from a pool of condensed ethereal energy, it exuded an almost imperceptible pulse that resonated deep within each of them, stirring memories of a time when magic was raw and unbridled. The creature's eyes, if it could be said to have any, glowed with a somber understanding, as though it recognized the profound loss that the knights and mages now felt. Thorn, his voice heavy with the weight of years spent battling both external threats and the demons within himself, stepped forward as if to challenge the very embodiment of nature's reclamation. "Who are you?" he demanded, his tone defiant yet laced with an undeniable sorrow. The creature did not reply in words, but instead sent forth a wave of energy that coursed through the chamber, forcing the assembled warriors to stagger and brace themselves against the onslaught. For a moment time seemed to slow, and in that suspended heartbeat the true meaning of the convergence became apparent. The veil was not merely mending, it was asserting its primacy over the magic that had been stolen, reforming itself from the ground up. The Guardian's energy surged, a torrent of reformed power that washed over the knights and mages, each ripple a manifestation of the natural world's will to reclaim what had been adulterated by mortal ambition. In that tumultuous moment, as energy roiled and the very foundation of their power seemed to crumble, the disparate members of the group were forced to confront the stark reality of their predicament. The healing of the veil, while a marvel of cosmic symmetry, meant that the magic they had spent a lifetime wielding, honing, and venerating would soon vanish. Lives built upon the ethereal promise of veil ashes, the very ethos of the ashen binding, were now imperiled by the inexorable surge of natural order. Mira's eyes filled with tears at the realization that the fleeting nature of true magic, once celebrated as the ultimate liberation, had been perverted into a tool for domination and control. Now, as the Guardian's power pressed down upon them, every knight and mage was forced to reckon with the profound transience of their own might. Yet even as despair threatened to overtake them, a spark of defiance remained. In the heart of the atrium, with the ephemeral Guardian looming and the reformed energies coursing through the air, Kalen raised his voice with resolute determination, the timbre of his words resonating like a clarion call. "We do not bow before change we did not choose," he declared, his gaze fixed on the shifting figure before them. "If the veil demands its due, then let us not cower in the face of its reclamation. Instead, we shall forge a new path, one that honors the fleeting beauty of magic and the indomitable spirit of those who wield it." His words, imbued with the weight of countless battles and the sorrow of irrevocable loss, galvanized his companions. They exchanged glances not of resignation but of fierce, unwavering determination, a silent pledge to confront this undeniable transformation with all that remained of their honor and valor. As the Guardians' energy ebbed and surged in rhythmic cadence, the atrium itself seemed to transform. Crystalline structures emerged from the walls, suspended in midair like fragments of a shattered dream, refracting the fading light into ethereal halos. In that luminous chaos, the assembled order saw a reflection of their own struggle, a desperate bid for renewal amid inexorable change. Selene, ever the eloquent voice of the shadows, moved among them with a calm that belied the storm raging outside. "The convergence is upon us," she intoned softly, her voice mingling with the resonant tones of the newly formed crystal fragments. Magic in its essence is not meant to be hoarded or manipulated for eternal might. It is ephemeral, ever-changing, a dance between creation and oblivion. This guardian, this living fragment of the veil, is not our enemy. It is a harbinger of balance, a reminder that even the greatest of powers must yield to the inexorable will of nature. In the tense moments that followed, as the Guardian's presence held them in thrall, and the crystalline luminescence bathed the chamber in an otherworldly glow, the group found themselves at a crossroads. Their long-held beliefs, meticulously forged through decades of combat and ritual, now faced the unyielding truth of the natural order. The very magic that had once granted them superhuman strength, that had stitched their lives together with threads of fire, shadow, wind, and stone, was slipping away into the embrace of a healing veil. The convergence was not an act of annihilation but of restoration, a rebalancing of the scales that had tipped too far in favor of mortal ambition and desire for permanence. And yet, in the midst of this cosmic recalibration, every member of the order felt an acute sense of loss, a longing for the magic that had defined them, for the power that had illuminated their path through endless darkness. As the atrium's light fluctuated between brilliance and shadow, Kaelin, Mira, Thorn, and Selene stood together, united in their shared determination to confront the consequences of this transformation. With the echoes of their voices and the harmonious murmur of ancient crystal formations enveloping them, they steeled themselves for the trials that lay ahead, trials that would test not only their martial prowess, but the very core of their identities. The Guardian's eyes, if such a thing could be said for a being wrought from pure reformed magic, blinked slowly in acknowledgement, a silent challenge and an invitation to reconcile the old ways with the inevitability of change. For hours that bled into days, the group remained entrenched in that luminous atrium, each moment a crucible in which the essence of their power was being both drawn out and remade. They experimented with incantations and rituals that had once been the bedrock of the Ashen Binding, seeking desperately to harness even a fraction of the reconstituted mana that now flowed unpredictably like a wild river. In the flickering interplay of light and shadow, they discovered that the restored veil possessed a will of its own, a consciousness that cared not for the ambitions of its former disciples, only for the delicate equilibrium between mortal desire and the untamed forces of creation. Every attempt to recapture their former strength was met with a counterforce, a subtle defiance that spoke of magic not as a tool for endless conquest, but as a fleeting gift meant to be revered and released. In a moment of quiet clarity amid the surge of reformed power, Mira found herself alone with her thoughts, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the crystalline structures. Her heart ached with the knowledge that what they had always taken for granted, the unending wellspring of power, the ability to wage war against darkness, was now being irrevocably altered. She remembered the faces of her fallen comrades, the dreams of a future shaped by the brilliance of unrestrained magic, and wondered if true strength could ever be reclaimed without succumbing to the inevitable vulnerability that accompanied its loss. In that instant, the convergence of the veil was revealed not as the end of an era, but as the dawning of a new chapter, a chapter in which power would be fleeting, and every victory would require not only the strength of muscle and magic, but the unwavering courage to embrace the transience of life itself. Together, as dusk bled into night and night melded back into day without discernible end, the assembled order made a silent vow beneath the soft radiance of reformed mana. They would seek to understand this new paradigm, to carve from its ephemeral nature a semblance of stability, even if it meant relinquishing the absolute control they had once coveted. Their journey through the atrium, through the very heart of the mending veil, had only just begun, a journey into the unknown realms where chaos and beauty entwined in delicate dance, where every moment was both a farewell to what had been and a tentative embrace of what might yet be. And so, amid the shifting light of crystalline halos and the lingering refrain of ancient incantations, the knights and mages of the Ashen Order stood ready to meet the future head-on. Their strength, forged in countless battles and tempered by the sorrow of inevitable change, would be reimagined in this new age, a time when magic, reclaimed by the veil, demanded humility, resilience, and the acceptance that even the mightiest powers must someday yield to nature's timeless call. The cavernous depths of the fortress, now transformed by the ethereal energies of converging magic, became the stage for the final reckoning. In the dim light of crystalline halos and shimmering runes, every surface of stone, every whisper of wind bore witness to centuries of struggle, regret, and hope. The group gathered once more in the heart of the ancient sanctum, a vast underground chamber, where the boundaries between the mortal realm and the veil were at their thinnest, a sacred nexus long forgotten but now reclaimed. Here the elements were in tumult. The air, heavy with the reformed energies of the veil, throbbed with a primal urgency, as if it were preparing for the last communion between old magic and new destiny. Kalen, his face etched with the memories of battles fought in the fire and the cold of desolation, stepped forward. The faded brilliance of his ruined armor and the scars upon his hands testified to a lifetime of relentless combat and sacrifice. He spoke, his voice reverberating over the hushed murmurs of the gathered order. "We stand upon the cusp of change," he pronounced, his tone resolute yet imbued with deep sorrow. "The veil's healing has drawn back the essence that once fueled our strength. We have clung to a semblance of power, but it is not ours to seize forever. Tonight we must choose our true legacy, to break these bindings, to surrender to the fleeting beauty of pure, uncorrupted magic, and to restore the ancient covenant that honored impermanence and rebirth." His words, both a farewell and a benediction, resonated in the silence that followed. Lady Mira, graceful and resolute, moved to join him. The aura of Gale magic still lingered faintly about her, a reminder of her swiftness and the ephemeral gusts that had once lent her power. Yet now her eyes shone with a profound understanding of loss and the inevitability of transformation. "Our destiny was never meant to be a constant flame, but a spark that ignites anew with every dawn," she said softly. "We have seen the danger in chaining ourselves to a power that should be as transient as the wind. Let us offer ourselves to the veil once more, not as prisoners but as its humble servants, willing to embrace the impermanence that restores both magic and our souls." Brother Thorn, whose inner fire had long wrestled with his soul, cast a pained but determined glance toward the flickering light that played upon the ancient symbols around them. His voice, tempered by years of anguish and the burden of his own regrets, joined the solemn chorus, "I have borne this flame too long, sacrificing the very essence of who I was. In the cruelty of permanence, I lost the chance to feel whole. Tonight, if we dare, we reclaim not the fire of control but its true, pure nature, a flame meant to warm, to guide, and then to burn away the falsehoods of our past." Celine, ever the keeper of shadows and silence, stepped forward with a quiet intensity that belied the ferocity hidden behind her guarded gaze. "In every shadow there is both darkness and the promise of light," she intoned, her voice a tender yet firm cadence that flowed like liquid night. "Our power was meant to be a dance, a graceful interplay between brilliance and obscurity. When we merge our spirits with the veil tonight, we do not simply relinquish power, we reforge the covenant from its very foundations, restoring the balance between our ephemeral nature and the endless cycle of creation and decay." The words of the four resonated as they moved in unison toward the altar at the center of the chamber, a relic that predated all the later modifications of the Ashen binding. The altar, hewn from a single piece of meteoric stone and etched with archaic runes that danced with transient light, pulsed with the living rhythm of forgotten rites. The group arranged themselves around it, forming a circle that symbolized unity and the timeless cycle of beginnings and endings. Each night, each mage had come to this moment with their own private grief and silent prayers. Their eyes, full of determination and sadness, reflected not just the loss of the magic they had known, but also the hope that in surrendering their old powers they might give birth to something purer and truer. Mira carefully unfurled a scroll, a fragile ancient manuscript that contained the blueprint of a ritual lost to time. Its faded ink chronicled the original communion of the ashen binding, a ritual meant to bridge the ephemeral with the eternal for but a fleeting moment. As she began to read the incantations aloud, her clear voice echoed in the expanse, summoning the elemental forces with a blend of language and emotion that transcended mortal articulation. The words wove an intricate tapestry, each syllable a thread that connected their present suffering with the hopes of ancient souls. The air around them began to shimmer as if the boundaries between the worlds were thinning once more, and the murmurs of the past rose like a chorus from beyond the veil of time. Kalen, standing at her side, lifted his hands to the heavens, drawing forth the last vestiges of Stonebinder's strength from within him. The ground beneath the altar trembled as he called upon the resilient force of earth, his voice merging with Mira's incantations in a resonant duet that symbolized the unyielding will of those who had fought for honor, unity, and truth. The ancient runes on the altar flared, pulsating rhythmically as if awakening from a long slumber. Slowly the elemental forces gathered, whispers of wind, glimmers of shadow, flickers of fire, and surges of earth, converging into a radiant ephemeral aura that enveloped the gathered order. But the rebirth of the covenant came not without its final trial. As the incantation reached its crescendo, the guardian of the reformed veil, the colossal living fragment of reconstituted magic, whose somber eyes had once locked with theirs in the atrium, manifested once more. It floated to the center of the circle, its form an ever-shifting blend of light and shadow, embodying the very essence of the veil's reclamation. The chamber fell into a tense quiet, every heartbeat measured against the living presence that now presided over them. Its voice, if it could be called such, was like the rustling of autumn leaves and the echo of distant thunder, a natural sound that spoke of deep time and unchangeable fate. Do you wish to forsake your might, to surrender the power that has defined you, and to embrace the cycle of rebirth? The guardian seemed to ask without words, its presence both a challenge and an invitation. The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility, each member of the circle grasping the gravity of the choice before them. In that delicate pause, they understood that the ritual was not merely an act of relinquishment, but a final, transformative act of creation, an offering that would either elevate them to a purer state of being or leave them forever bereft of the might that had sustained their order. With a shared nod, the four stepped forward as one, placing their hands upon the cool surface of the altar. Their contact sent a ripple of radiant energy through the chamber, igniting the ancient symbols and uniting their disparate essences into a single shimmering current. The air grew thick with both the warmth of unyielding camaraderie and the chill of impending sacrifice. Each heartbeat, each inhaled breath became part of the incantation, a living testament to the trials they had endured and the hope that through the destruction of the old, something infinitely more precious could be reborn. Mira's voice, imbued with both trembling emotion and resolute authority, rose once more to guide the ritual. We surrender our borrowed power to you, O Veil, and accept the truth that magic is transient, a spark that burns only to be reborn in the flames of renewal. Her words mingled with Kalen's deep, resonant tone, the fervent declarations of Thorn, and the quiet, steady assurance of Selene. As they repeated the ancient phrases, the circle glowed like a constellation of souls intertwined by fate, a moment of unity so profound that even the abyss seemed to hold its breath. Light burst forth from the altar in a cascade of spectral hues, a final conflagration that burned away the vestiges of corrupted permanence. The guardian, at the center of the luminous vortex, shimmered in approval as the energy of the gathered order coalesced with the raw, reformed essence of the veil. For a moment, everything was suspended in a timeless dance, a ballet of fire, shadow, wind, and earth, as the old bindings shattered like brittle glass in the face of relentless renewal. The intensity of the surge, however, was overwhelming. Waves of uncontainable magic rippled outward, enveloping each member of the circle in a cocoon of ephemeral brilliance. In that radiant tide, the knights and mages felt their formerly anchored powers slip away, replaced by a sublime lightness, a sense of being untethered from the rigid confines of their past identities. Kalen's arms, once heavy with the strength of stone and memory, trembled as he sensed the ancient powers shifting course, as if welcoming a rebirth that transcended mortal ambition. Mira's swift agility was now replaced by an awareness of a deeper, quieter flow, a graceful surrender to the rhythm of nature. Thorn's inner flame, which had long tormented him with its ferocity, softened into a gentle luminescence that spoke of healing and forgiveness, and Celine's shadows, once as sharp as daggers forged in midnight, merged into a soft, enveloping darkness that promised both mystery and solace. The chamber itself transformed as the energy receded. The crystalline structures that had once hung suspended began to dissipate into streams of silver light, while the ancient runes on the altar dimmed from a burning white to a tender, unassuming glow. The Guardian's colossal form, now fully integrated into the reformed tapestry of magic, bowed its spectral head in a final act of relinquishment. It was as though the veil itself had accepted the sacrifice, and in return restored the natural order. The frantic pulse of power faded into a steady rhythmic cadence, a heartbeat that echoed the simple truth of impermanence and rebirth. In that sacred final moment, the assembled order stood transformed. They were no longer bound by the corrupted might of the ashen binding, nor held hostage by the insatiable hunger for eternal power. They had embraced the inherent beauty of transience, becoming living embodiments of the ancient covenant as it was meant to be, a fleeting communion of mortal spirit and divine magic. As the last echoes of the incantation faded, silence reigned over the chamber, a silence filled not with absence, but with the profound presence of a renewed destiny. When the light finally receded entirely, the knights and mages looked at one another, their expressions a mixture of awe, sorrow, and quiet hope. The chamber's oppressive weight had lifted, replaced by a gentle luminescence that spoke of dawn and the promise of new beginnings. Kaelin, with eyes reflecting both the ache of loss and the glimmer of hope, broke the silence. "It is done. We have laid down the false chains of power and embraced the truth of our ephemeral nature." His words, though soft, carried the weight of a lifetime of battles fought and dreams sacrificed for a chance at true renewal. Mira stepped forward, her gaze steady as she regarded the transformed faces of her companions. "We have given up our old might," she said, "but in doing so, we reclaim the very essence of magic as it was meant to be, a living, breathing testament to both our resilience and our capacity for change. Our legacy is not in the brute strength of unending power, but in the courage to accept our fleeting nature and to find beauty in every moment of impermanence." Her voice resonated with quiet determination, a promise that even without the old forms of magic, they would forge a future defined by integrity, balance, and hope. Brother Thorn, his once burdened soul now lightened by the transformative act, allowed himself a rare smile. "I have spent so long chasing a fire that consumed me," he confessed, his tone tinged with bittersweet relief, "that I forgot the warmth of a gentle flame. Tonight I feel that warmth returning, a flame that does not seek to devour, but to illuminate a path forward. We have been reborn, not as masters of eternal might, but as humble stewards of magic's true essence." His words, spoken with heartfelt sincerity, were met with nods and softened gazes from those around him. Celine's eyes, once veiled in the mystery of endless shadows, shone with a quiet luminescence as she stepped into the fragile light. "The darkness I once wielded to mask my sorrow is now transformed," she said softly. "I see that the beauty of our existence lies not in the permanence of power, but in our ability to let go and be reborn with each passing moment. We are free, if only for the transient bliss of knowing that every end births a new beginning." Her voice, a gentle murmur that blended with the natural cadence of the newly reformed veil, encapsulated the profound truth they had all embraced. And so, as the newly minted covenant settled into the very fabric of the ancient stone, the chamber itself seemed to exhale a deep, resonant sigh, a sound that echoed the renewal of the veil and the promise of regeneration. The knights and mages, stripped of the burdens of unchecked power, gathered their scattered thoughts, and with tentative steps began the journey back through the corridors of the fortress. In their hearts, the memory of the ritual remained as both a tribute to the past and an emblem of the future, a future where magic was not a tool for domination, but a sacred fleeting gift to be cherished and shared. Outside, the long-forgotten mists of dawn crept over the horizon. The ancient stones of the fortress, now bathed in the soft glow of a new day, bore silent testimony to the transformation wrought within. In that quiet morning light, the order disbanded their circle and stepped into the unknown with clarity and resolve. They would rebuild what had been shattered, not by clinging to old forms of power, but by embracing the truth that strength could be found in the transient beauty of human frailty. The legacy of the Ashen Knights would be rewritten, no longer a tale of endless might and tragic hubris, but a story of sacrifice, renewal, and the serene acceptance of impermanence. In the final moments of that solemn night, as the last vestiges of the Guardian's energy faded into the gentle pulse of nature's reclaimed order, the assembled order shared one final, lingering look, a silent farewell to the past, and a hopeful greeting to what lay ahead. The bonds they had formed in their struggle, forged in fire and tempered by sorrow, were now the foundation upon which a new covenant would be built. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the transformed knights and mages stepped forward into a world reborn, a world where magic was no longer a chain but a fleeting, wondrous grace, destined to spark inspiration even in the face of inevitable change. Thus, the story of the Ashen Knights reached its resolute conclusion in that hidden sanctuary beneath ancient stone. The false permanence that had once bound them was shattered, and in its place arose a new vision of ephemeral brilliance, a covenant renewed in the flames of sacrifice and the gentle promise of every dawn. With hearts unburdened by the weight of eternal power and minds open to the endless cycle of renewal, they embraced a future where the fleeting nature of magic was celebrated as both a challenge and a blessing. Their journey had come full circle, and as they ventured forth into the bright new day, the echoes of their sacrifice lingered as a timeless reminder that even in the fleeting spark of a moment, there exists the power to transform, to inspire, and ultimately to be reborn. And so, beneath the rising sun and the eternal whisper of the mending veil, the order once fractured, now whole, carried forth the legacy of a truth both ancient and ever-renewing, concluding this chapter of their epic tale in a final, transcendent act of unity and rebirth.